President Cyril Ramaphosa used the last State of the Nation address of the 6th administration to outline how the government has improved livelihoods over the past 3 decades. He told an anecdotal story of a child born with bleak future prospects at the dawn of democracy in 1994. Ramaphosa described the fictional Tintswalo's upbringing as being in a household provided with basic water and electricity, among other services, which he says is testimony to the progress made.
Tintswalo and many others born at the same time as her were beneficiaries of the first policies of the democratic state to provide free health care for pregnant women and children under the age of 6. Tintswalo's formative years were spent in a house provided by the state, one of millions of houses built to shelter the poor. Tintswalo grew up in a household provided with basic water and electricity, in a house where her parents were likely to have lived without electricity before 1994.
Joining us now is Gogo Londiwe Mntambo, who is the program manager at Rivonia Circle. Londiwe, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. Now, many opposition parties have described the president's address as unrealistic, especially with regards to the analogy he made of Tintswalo being this child born in 1994 and who continued to flourish over the years, all thanks to the amenities given to them by the ANC government. What was your take as the Rivonia Circle with regards to Tintswalo?
Thank you so much for having me. I think unfortunately the story of Tintswalo is one that isn't true for most of us or isn't real for most of us. Majority of Tintswalo, the story of Tintswalo is probably 1 in every 100, maybe even 1 in every 1,000 young people in South Africa, particularly black people in South Africa. I think, the story of Tintswalo makes it seem that those of us born in 1994 have been born into this incredible, or at least just automatically better life, which is just not true. A lot of young people who have gone through the schooling system and have gone to higher education are currently sitting unemployed, right? A lot of your Tintswalos are currently sitting working jobs that they didn't necessarily go to higher education for, but because they need to work, and because the reality that they are faced with means that they have to work anywhere where they find work, means that they are working in different fields or not working at all, right? It's a bit, for me, it feels a little bit unreal, but it also feels a little bit tone deaf. With the unemployment rate sitting where it's sitting, particularly the youth unemployment rate sitting where it's sitting, the story of Tintswalo seems a bit tone deaf for me.
And speaking of that tone deaf, why would you think the president would describe Tintswalo's life just only in that glory and omitting some of the issues that you currently raise that many young people born in 1994 are actually currently facing?
Look, I think it's important for us to remember that it's an election year, 1, but 2, it's the State of the Nation address. This is the last one for this administration, and so in order for them to at least for them to seem that they've done some work, to seem that there's been some progress, to offer some level of hope, comparing where we are now versus 1994, obviously there's a big difference. And so And so it's important for the current administration to show that big difference, even though there isn't much of a difference between this state of the nation and our context, this state of the nation, and in the last State of the Nation address, which was last year. And so the framing of the 30 years in democracy and the sort of progress that we've achieved in the 30 years is important for the president and important for this particular administration, because it shows the sort of great strides that have been made post-apartheid. But of course, it's been 30 years, right? But of course, it's also if the comparison is between now and apartheid, of course there's going to be a drastic difference. And so I think it's a tactical and a political framing or choice that has been made to say that these are the grand sort of differences between your life now and your life during apartheid, particularly for people who lived in both contexts.
I mean, speaking of some of those contexts, the DA leader of the opposition party, John Steenhuisen, spoke of Tintswalo and said that should Tintswalo get sick, she's most likely to die in a state hospital due to the lack of electricity because of load shedding. The president, with regards to health, has now said that the NHI bill is sitting on his desk and he is applying his mind to it. What's your take, with many opposition parties being against the NHI bill?
Look, I mean, I think national health insurance is important. I think good quality healthcare is important, that all of us have access to good quality healthcare is important. The question then becomes, under which government and administration are we implementing whatever progressive policies that we'd like to implement? Because no matter how progressive the policy is, if it's being implemented in a context where the state isn't particularly functioning, state hospitals aren't particularly functioning, it does leave a little bit to be desired, right? So we have to think about the context in which these progressive policies are being implemented. And I mean, we cannot run away from the fact that from our corruption-ridden and patronage-ridden governance system. And so even when this the national health insurance is being implemented, you know, it's being implemented in the patronage system, within the sort of corrupt context that we live in. And so it's a bit I don't know, it just doesn't feel that this is a real solution to a real problem that we have with our healthcare.
In some of the utterances that came out of the business sector, some of the leaders within that space have come out to say, yes, that progress does exist, but most of that progress needs to be attributed to the influence and the input of the private sector. How much of a role, especially as an organization, do you believe the private sector really has in their social compact and in also assisting Tintswalo in progressing in life?
I mean, I'm not too sure how we measure that role, right? I mean, of course, the private sector does play a role. I think government plays a huge role, right? But I think for me, it's not about measuring whether it's private or it's the public sector that has made this Tintswalo possible. For me, it's about if we look at Tintswalo's life, or most Tintswalo's lives, qualitatively, what is their experience of this democracy, right? What is their experience of governance? What is their experience of going into these universities that our parents wouldn't have had access? What was my qualitative experience of that previously white institution, right? And if we look at all of those things, I think we end up with a different story, or at least we end up with a more colorful story than the one that the president puts out. I think it's important for the private sector to play a role in our democracy and to play a role in our governance, but I also think that shouldn't then negate government's role. Government's role remains to govern in this country, right? And because we've chosen the particular democracy that we've chosen, and we've chosen the particular governance that we've chosen, of course it's important that government not only regulate, but also be providing when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, when it comes to housing. All of these different things that the president lists as priorities are incredibly important to fall under government, right? And to be provided for by the government. But I think when we look at the priorities that we listed in last year's Sona, and where we are in this year's Sona, if we were to use the Sona as a sort of monitoring and evaluation kind of tool, I think we would find ourselves wanting. It seems to me that there's a lot of generic and repetition from the president in this Sona, as he had spoken in last year's Sona. So I don't know. I think there's a need for us as citizens and as active citizens to engage and critically engage with the president and the way that he's decided to frame where we are as the nation.
Lastly, Londiwe, I mean, as an organization, you are inspired to create a new leader for a new era in the coming years. How would you want Tintswalo to have different experiences when we do go into an election and a new government is coming into place? What would you ask of them in creating an environment for Tintswalo to become that new leader?
So, I don't know if this is luckily or fortunately or unfortunately. I'm born in 1994, and so maybe I am a Tintswalo on some level. And I think for me, what I want and what we've heard from the different communities that we've interacted with is that people want a government that works. People want a state that works, right? And that means that regardless of what my dreams are as Tintswalo or somebody else's dreams are, I should be able to achieve those dreams and to participate, whether in the economy, whether in politics, or in different spheres of our society. I should be able to participate without limitations. I think we need a government with a plan in order for Tintswalo to be able to live this life that the president paints. I also think it's important then for us as Tintswalo to, particularly this year, to take a stand and decide what it is that we want and in our country, and decide how we're going to get there, right? And I think there's a big opportunity this year with the election coming up to, as Tintswalos, decide the kind of thing that we want to create, or the kind of South Africa that we want to live in.
Oh, certainly. Londiwe Mntambo, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That's Program Manager at Rivonia Circle, Londiwe Mntambo, speaking to us on the back of the President's State of the Nation address last night.